we're going to start with a bit of focus on international news this evening on the India development debate, right on top, but of course a lot more coming up for you in the show as well. But first, let's talk about what's happening in the United States. All eyes are on whether Donald Trump, the United States president, will be discharged today from Walter Reed Medical Center, where he's undergoing treatment for COVID-19. His staff in the White House has been quoted as saying that a decision will be taken later today. In fact, news just coming in that the White House press secretary has also tested positive for COVID-19. So now you have a cluster of high-ranking officials, including the President of the United States, who's tested positive for COVID-19. We have to see what impact this has on opinion polls, on the election results, and elections themselves on November 3rd, as well as on the US market. So interesting thing about the markets this evening, the Dow Jones up over 300 points, nearly 350 points, both on the back of Trump seeming to get better. Remember the whole roadshow that he undertook from inside his car, waving to supporters, as well as the possibility of a stimulus package coming around anytime soon. So we're going to look at all of the angles of this Donald Trump story and, one of the most powerful men in the world getting COVID-19 and what that really means for world events which are going to follow. Let me go across to Michael Kugelman first, who's joining us on the show. I have Michael Kugelman this evening. Dr. Sanjiv Badhwar, Head ENT Service of Kokila Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital, is joining us on the show. And I'm also going to be speaking with Seth Freeman. Let me go across to Michael Kugelman first. Michael, what is the situation right now? What are people anticipating and talking about? Because this was likely, it was possible that anyone can get COVID-19, including the President of the United States. Does it really turn things around for the elections?
Well, I think that this really reinforces the positions of Trump's supporters and critics. For his critics, for his opponents, they see this man that essentially kept waving off the threat of COVID and saying it's not that serious, and then all of a sudden he gets it, which sort of reinforces this idea that he simply does not know what he's doing, that he's incompetent, and that he looks really bad given what happened. But for his supporters, I think it's quite striking to see in interviews what Trump supporters have said. They basically are really seeing him now as one of them. They may not see him as the invincible guy that they had thought he was because he had managed to avoid COVID, but they see that he's vulnerable to the virus just like the rest of them. And I think that will endear him to them even more than the case had been before. So again, I think that I wouldn't overstate the impact of his positive test on the broader election. Certainly it's true that I imagine he won't be able to do any type of in-person public rallies as he had been doing for quite some time, despite health warnings and all that. He got a lot of energy. It was a big positive for him, a big advantage for him to be out there firing up his base. He got a lot of energy from that, and so that could be a loss. But I don't see it being a huge loss. But looking forward now, it's true that we're hearing that he's doing better, that he'll probably be released from the hospital relatively soon. But there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's to come here. As with coronavirus, one of the things we know is that it's hard to predict. He may be feeling better now, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't get sick again later. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of Americans are very frustrated about the lack of clear information coming from the White House, including Trump's own medical staff, about how sick he is, how sick he was, when he was on oxygen, if he was on oxygen, and that type of thing. So, and I think that the fact that he's been receiving some medications that typically that are in experimental form and are only typically given to those that have really serious symptoms, that's also raised a lot of questions as to whether he really is in worse health than his medical staff and the administration more broadly are talking about. But beyond that, just a lot of wider concern in Washington about D.C. becoming a new super spreader site, given that you had this Rose Garden ceremony for the new Supreme Court nominee where a number of people, senior officials in the administration, have tested positive. That's raised concern that the administration itself and the White House itself could be a new source of the spread of the virus. So still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of frustration about not really knowing what's going on. And for Trump's opponents, just a lot of anger about not being more in the clear as to what's going on, because people want to know what is going on with the health of their president.
Yeah. Absolutely. How are markets looking at this? Seth is with us. Seth, Dow Jones are up about 350 points. Is it because there are chances that Donald Trump will be discharged from hospital later this evening so that he seems to be doing better? Is it hopes of a stimulus package? Is it the end of uncertainty? What are markets looking at right now?
Because of the ambiguous information we're getting about the president's health, other than suddenly someone who is infected with COVID-19 is going to go back to the office, I have to believe it relates more to the stimulus. The market did not react so negatively, frankly, to the health fears on Friday, and look where we are today. We have a fairly strong opening. Now that could change, intraday. We've seen a lot of intraday volatility, but this is just sort of one more layer of uncertainty, especially as we see how many political personalities, leaders in our country are infected. There was just an announcement that the White House spokeswoman tested positive. These people have had tremendous contact with the leadership in the United States and world leaders. And this is just a really unnecessary crisis 29 days before the election, while we have many other pressing issues here in the country. I'm here in the Bay Area, where we have had tremendously thick smoke for the last 3 weeks due to the fires in Northern California. And so this is just sort of one additional source of stress, I think, for many Americans.
Michael Kugelman spoke a little while earlier about the conflicting sort of information that is coming in. A lot of us are reading, hearing about the conflicting information, what medication is being administered, etc. And Dr. Badhwar is with us today to help us through it and break it down. Dr. Badhwar, do explain to us, why are people concerned about, dexamethasone being administered to Donald Trump? What does it mean? And the fact is that he's a 74-year-old gentleman who is now got COVID-19. What are the kind of risks associated in that stage?
At the outset, we would first like to wish President Trump a speedy recovery. And one can only comment on the reports coming in. So the reports coming in, we have a 74-year-old individual, mildly obese. I don't know about any comorbidities, but he has been administered a cocktail of monoclonal antibodies to start with. So monoclonal antibodies are antibodies which are generated in the lab, and they mimic the antibody response of the body against coronavirus. So this is a mix of two antibodies, REGN 10933 and 10987. About 275 volunteers have already been administered this, and multi-phase trials are on both in the US and the UK. 1,300 individuals are to be exhibited to this in the coming weeks. So these antibodies are a bridge into our current status until we have a safe and effective vaccine. They aim to stop the progress of the disease and ameliorate the symptoms. So as per the reports, I can only comment on that. He was first given a dose of these antibodies. He was exhibited to injection remdesivir and dexamethasone. It is speculated, as per the reports, that he did suffer a dip in his oxygen saturation, which I believe has come back to normal. Now, as per the reports, he was detected to be COVID-19 positive on Friday, and as per the report stated by his personal physician, he has been fever-free for 24 hours. But as you know, COVID-19 does not respect any barriers, and it's a very insidious kind of a virus. So 5 days from point of infection is still early days yet. Sometimes on day 7, day 8, things may turn for the better or the worse. So what I would say is we should hold our horses, pray that he gets well soon, but it's very early to speculate on the course and the progression of the disease. But I'm sure he has the best team of advisors treating him, and we hope for the best.
No, of course. Of course. I want to understand the kind of impact this has on things like campaigning, Michael. And does it really impact the final outcome? I mean, there are polls around the 2nd and 3rd of October which show Biden opening up the lead. There are some campaign trails that Donald Trump will miss. Do you think it makes a difference? Also, the fact that his presidency and his own record of controlling coronavirus is up for scrutiny as an issue in this election, and then he has contracted coronavirus. A lot of people around him in the White House have also contracted coronavirus.
Yeah, so I don't think there have been any polls released since Trump's positive diagnosis, because that was relatively recent. So we don't have a sense as to how this has impacted polling just yet. But indeed, it is significant that Trump had been scheduled to make a series of in-person appearances at campaigns in swing states, key states in the election, and those have had to be postponed, of course. I know that the plan has been to have members of Trump's family sort of serving as surrogates and going out to campaign in his place. That's not the same thing, though, because the campaign, the supporters want to see Trump himself. I mean, they're happy to see his family, but they want to see Trump himself. And as I said before, these in-person rallies are very dynamic and energetic, and he really fires up his base. And I think he ensures that he's going to get his supporters to go to the polls when he's out there, braving, in the view of his supporters, braving the risks of coronavirus to appeal to them. So the fact that that's not going to happen is significant. If his health improves to the point that he can engage in online campaigning, that certainly will help, but it's not the same thing. But my view is that, even before his positive diagnosis, President Trump was increasingly vulnerable in this election because of his perceived poor response to the pandemic, as well as the very serious economic crisis that emerged in the U.S. Following the pandemic, as well as these racial and social tensions that have been in play, as you know, for quite some time, particularly since you've had some cases of police shootings of African Americans. So he had been in a lot of trouble even before this pandemic, even before his positive diagnosis. So I'm not sure if one could say that the fact that he tested positive will have any type of major impact on the election itself. I think that there are not all that many undecided voters left at this point, especially with just a few weeks left to go. Now, one could argue that perhaps he would be able to get some sympathy votes, so to speak. Let's say that you're looking at undecided voters that have been lifelong Republican voters, but have not liked, they've been very concerned about some of Trump's policies and have been on the fence as to whether to vote for him this time or to go for Biden or not vote at all. Certainly some of these types of voters, if they see that Trump is sick, if they see him as someone that means well, they may be compelled to go vote for him at this point. But again, I wouldn't overstate the number of undecided voters that there would be right now. So my bottom line is that I think that most people have already decided who they're going to vote for, and that this situation with this positive test certainly has broader implications in terms of campaigning, as I discussed. But I don't necessarily think that it would be the tipping point, so to speak, or the one single factor that would have a major impact on the outcome of the election.
Yeah, and as the doctor on the panel also said, we'll have to wait and see how it progresses. Seth, I just want a quick word from you on how markets and market watchers like yourself are looking at the election right now, and how big of a deal it is becoming. The less than 30 days to go. Is it looking like a less closer fight than it did earlier?
Well, I think we're just going to be focused on stimulus, We had airlines, for example, announce a lot of imminent layoffs, putting some pressure on the government and Congress to act. And last week, Trump at the last moment signed a continuation to the budget to avoid that crisis. I think we're just going to be looking at fundamentals over the next couple weeks. The election is far from over because of the Electoral College and the all or nothing nature of electoral voting. And so even though it looks like Biden is ahead today, we know that the Trump administration and Republicans are looking to suppress votes around the country, and that could have an impact. The upside is that many Americans are expected to vote by mail, and that may push the election towards Biden. But I think in terms of markets, we're going to be looking at consumer behavior, sentiment, how many more bankruptcies, Chapter 11s, especially large ones, that we have, and probably some indication, frankly, we're going to be getting into the holiday season, and online retailers are going to start promoting goods for the holidays, and I think that's going to be a bellwether indicator of public sentiment.
Well, we leave all the election excitement closer to the date, but meanwhile, all eyes on whether Donald Trump is discharged from hospital or not and what happens next. I think, Dr. Badhwar, if you want to give us a quick last word before we wrap this particular discussion. Seeing what you have seen, and you now have immense experience of how coronavirus keeps impacting patients even after they are negative, COVID negative. The gruel and grind of election campaigning, is that even possible for Donald Trump?
See, Tamanna, that again is in the realm of speculation. But from what we've seen over the past 6 months, the COVID-19 takes a toll. It's not so easy to bounce back. And, and the older you get, it's more difficult. So to get back on the campaign trail, it's going to be tough. But I guess Donald Trump is an institution in himself, and we have to see what he's up to.
Absolutely. It's crazy what election will do to all people, and that, excitement of the campaign trail.